Okay, we're good to go. Good morning, everybody. And all the folks on the Zoom call and others who might be joining on YouTube. For the record, my name is Dan Brown, and I co-chair the grant committee with Barbara Boyer. Barbara's unable to join us today, so I'll be running the meeting solo. We want to remind everybody that this is a virtual meeting, and it's being streamed also on the YouTube channel and recorded. For those folks watching on YouTube or joining by Zoom, the meeting materials are in the board and committee section of the OWEB website, and the committee materials are towards the bottom of the page, and you can click on the grants committee to have access to the materials for today's meeting. I'd like to call on committee members and OWEB staff members to introduce themselves. And so I will start with Liz.
Good morning. Liz Akpawa, representing the Board of Forestry and voting board member for OWEB.
Thanks, Liz. Good morning. How about Lindsay?
Good morning, everybody. Lindsay McClary, public at large voting member on the OWEB board, and I live in West Salem, and I work for the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde.
Thanks, Lindsay. How about Chris?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Allen. I'm a non-voting advisory board member representing the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
And Liza Jane?
Good morning. I'm Liza Jane McAllister. I live in Wallowa County and represent the public at large on the board and serve as a co-chair.
Thank you. And then I think that's all the board members. So how about Stephanie?
Good morning, Stephanie Page, Acting Director at OWEB.
And Eric?
Good morning, everyone. Eric Williams, Grant Program Manager at OWEB.
And Eric H.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. Eric Hartstein, Policy Coordinator at OWEB.
You guys must have that figured out, like who's going to jump in first, right? Yeah. Audrey?
Good morning, Audrey Hatch, the Conservation Outcomes Coordinator on OWEB staff.
And Andrew?
Hopefully I'm not an interloper. So I'm Climate Planning Coordinator here based in Umatilla County Public Health. And we have geographic scope pretty much all of Eastern Oregon. So trying to get smart on how to make some of these opportunities happen over here in Eastern Oregon.
Great. And Nicole, do you just want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Dan. Nicole Bettinardi. I am the board liaison and executive assistant at OWEB.
Did we miss anybody? Okay. The agenda for today has 3 items. We're going to start with public comment, and then we're going to preview January board meeting items, and then get an update on the strategic plan. And so does anyone have any questions or comments on the agenda itself? Then I think we will run right into public comments. We didn't receive any written comments for this meeting. And does anybody online want to provide public comments? If so, raise your hand. No? Okay, so no public comments. Great. So that brings us into the preview of the January board meeting items, which is a Rulemaking 101 presentation for the FIP to initiate FIP rulemaking, and then the FIP effectiveness monitoring and grant request. And I'm guessing that Eric and or Audrey are gonna kick us off on on those items.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I can kick us off, and we'll ask Eric Williams and Audrey to chime in, fill in any gaps. So we do have some January board meeting topics that are relevant for this committee, and we wanted to kind of daylight them before the board meeting. First, we have a 45-minute agenda item that will include both a rulemaking 101 and a request for the board to initiate rulemaking on the Focused Investment Partnership, or FIP, program. So with rulemaking 101, we wanted to do a little bit of a deeper dive into rulemaking, as we're currently doing quite a bit of it here at OWEB. Right now, we're doing small grant program rules, as well as a new drinking water source protection grant program. And we also have a number of other items in the queue for rulemaking, really in the foreseeable future. So what we want to cover for the board in January will include things like typical timelines for rulemaking, how staff look to develop rulemaking advisory committees, or RACs, what a typical RAC meeting looks like, opportunities for public comment, and board engagement throughout the rulemaking process. So before moving on to the FIP rulemaking item, I think I'll pause here to see if there are any questions, or if the committee has any other ideas on what you might want to see in a rulemaking 101 session.
Looks like,
oh, go ahead. Sorry, Dan.
I was just going to say, it looks like Liza Jane has a question.
Yeah, Eric, I just want to call out, what's a RAC?
So thank you, Liza Jane. So RAC is the Rulemaking Advisory Committee, and those are made up of individuals that are most going to be impacted by the agency rules. So as a grant making agency, we typically are looking to get members on a RAC that are either applicants to our grant programs, grantees, reviewers, or other people that would be potentially impacted by those rules.
Eric, do you have any, when you select those, is it, I'm sure that we try and make that regional, but is there any, rules about that?
I don't know if there's,
from
yeah,
every...
we definitely try to do that. I mean, that's one of the things that we're trying to do with all of our RACs, is to get good regional representation, as well as the type of organization that RAC members might represent. SWCDs, watershed councils, tribes, type of activities that they're doing. Some do a lot of in-stream work, others are more in the uplands. So try to get it really good.
And those RAC meetings are public meetings as well, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah. So we are having them either live streamed on YouTube. Recently, we've gone to just having a Zoom open link, and folks are joining that way.
Liza Jane, anything else, or do you want to put your hand down?
Nope, I've only had one cup of coffee, so don't worry.
Great. So yeah, if there's other items that you think would be of interest for Rulemaking 101, feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email. We can include it in the 101 session. Okay, so moving on to one of those rulemaking that are in the queue, which is FIP rules. So these are Division 47. A little bit of background on these. So these were first adopted in 2018, which was really kind of in the middle of the first cohort of our FIP initiatives. And so we've now had 3 cohorts of FIP initiatives, with the 4th cohort set to begin in April after the board awards. So suffice it to say, I think we've learned quite a bit over the past 5 years, and we've discussed a little bit with the committee about the interest in revisiting the FIP rules to incorporate some of these learnings. So we are looking to open up the entire FIP rule set in January, asking the board to initiate rulemaking for both review and potential revisions to the FIP rules, including some kind of regular cleanup of the rules, and then some kind of more substantive areas where I know staff would we'd like to focus some efforts. So that would include the process for determining the board identified ecological priorities for the FIP program, revisiting how required match is accounted for in FIP, whether the overlap rule should still apply in the program. So a little background on that. That's the overlap rule states that where projects in the geographic area of a FIP initiative and those projects that are focused on programs and actions identified in that initiative's proposal are ineligible for OWEB open solicitation grants. So we'll want to, I think, take a close look at that. And potentially some real others. So there's some real meaty topics for the board and the RAC to weigh in on with the FIP rulemaking. With the schedule, we're going to be walking a bit of a tight timeline because as you know, the current FIP solicitation, where the board will be awarding the 4th cohort of FIPs in April. We're also looking to the 5th cohort of FIPs. So that would be sometime after January of 2025. So we're going to try to kind of fit this in between the 4th and 5th cohort of FIPs. So while we'd like to ask the board to initiate rulemaking in January, I think would really use the time between January and the April board meeting where the FIP awards would be made to start the recruitment of a RAC and work internally on some potential edits to the rules. And we would not have the RAC begin meeting until after the FIP board awards in April. So, I mean, working pretty hard through summer and fall to develop rules to bring to the full board in January of 2025 for consideration. So we think we would check in with the grants committee in June, and then again in September, and the full board in July to make sure we're on track with some of the main themes with this FIP rulemaking. I'm thinking right now about the ecological priorities that are determined by the board, but there's a whole host of other things we'll want to make sure we're on the right track with the board with the FIP program. So maybe I'll just stop there, see if there's any questions or anything Eric or Audrey, Stephanie, you'd like to add.
Chris?
Yeah, just a quick question, Eric. I'm definitely interested in understanding more the FIP program and especially the 7 ecological priorities that guide where those grant funds go on the ground. So it sounded like you were going to cover it, but I just want to affirm that in that presentation at the board meeting, you'll provide some context for how those 7 ecological priorities were developed in the past and in the process for revisiting and perhaps adding or revising those 7 ecological priorities.
Yes, yeah, we can definitely touch on that at the board meeting. Thanks, Chris.
All right, thanks, Eric.
Anybody else? Questions or comments?
Okay. So then the last item that will be considered at the January board meeting is a FIP effectiveness monitoring grant request. So this will be an action item that staff will bring to the board in January, requesting the board delegate some of the funding from the FIP effectiveness monitoring line item in the spending plan to the executive director to enter into a grant agreement with the Bonneville Environmental Foundation, or BEF. So in the past, these FIP effectiveness monitoring grants to BEF have supported items like the Partnership Learning Project, which the board heard a presentation from Jennifer Arnold at the October meeting. Some development of adaptive management and monitoring guidance for FIP partnerships, and assistance to partnerships in designing and implementing progress monitoring frameworks for their initiatives, and really a whole host of other things that have been helpful both to FIP partnerships and, frankly, benefiting the FIP program in general. So for this biennium, BEF is developing a grant application that, if funded, would provide FIP program support through a program assessment that would really help inform the rulemaking that we're proposing, direct support for partnerships through training opportunities and one-on-one support if needed, meeting with OWEB staff regularly to talk through elements of the FIP program and any issues or concerns that arise, and I think perhaps most importantly, to design and coordinate an in-person FIP gathering for FIP partnerships in fall of 2024. We had one of these, I think it was back in 2018, and it was well attended. People kind of still talk about it. What a really good learning opportunity and networking event that was. So I want to repeat that this fall. So I'll stop there. And I know Audrey, Eric, if you have anything to add on this item, I'll look to you.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Just a couple things I would emphasize that, when you touched on the adaptive management guidance and the monitoring restoration initiatives, and also some guidance to help the FIPs produce strategic action plans. Those are thorough reference documents that are available for FIPs and also other restoration practitioners. And I think just to comment that through the review and evaluation of the program, and through that partnership learning program, we've heard how those guidance documents have helped partnerships be successful. And the second thing I would add, Eric, is that theory of change and progress monitoring framework support. That has really kind of been and continues to be kind of the basis that initiatives and staff use to prepare the progress tracking reports that then come to the board every couple of years that help really reflect on the program and that adaptive management piece.
Yeah, thanks for adding those on, Audrey. So again, this will be an action item at the board meeting in January, and we're happy to answer any questions at this time.
Any questions from folks? So simple one from me, just to make sure I understand everything that was just said in a very simple statement, which is that the board's going to be asked to move money from the FIP effectiveness and monitoring grant budget item to basically fund BEF to do this work. Is that a pretty good? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Eric and Audrey.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is a strategic plan update. We talked about that at the last board meeting, and we're going to hear what happened with the comments from the board, I think.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Members of the committee, since we're undertaking this effort to refresh the strategic plan, and we're going to be talking about it at the next couple of board meetings, and we spent half a day at the October board meeting as well. Our plan is, at least for preview to the January board meeting, to come to each of the board's 3 committees, the DEI committee, the climate and water committee, and this committee, just to give you a status update of where we are in the process, moving from the October board meeting to January. And so just to refresh the October discussion, we had talked about how the current strategic plan, which was finalized in 2018, has some really good foundational pieces to it. The parts that describe who we are and how we approach our work, those are still valid and don't need to change. And we also talked about how the 7 strategic priorities that were in that plan probably could use a little bit of tweaking. And that's what we focused our work on with the board in October in that half-day work session. The result of that work on the strategic priorities is shown in the document that's on the committee's webpage, showing what's now 6 strategic priorities, with some of the language reworked to make, I think, it more clearer, and also clearer in the sense of providing direction for the specific strategies and tactics that we build to implement those priorities in such a way that we can have a better idea of, over the years, how well we have done at actually implementing those priorities. And so the next phase, and if you recall from Steve Patty's presentation, he has kind of 3 movements in this refresh of the strategic plan. The first is to get clear, the second is to get focused, and then the third is to get moving. In the get clear phase, there were significant engagements with board members, with grantees, with staff, to elicit people's thoughts on where we should be going with our strategic plan. We're now in the get focused phase, which is to try to take that information and first develop the priorities that we finalized at the October board meeting. And then the next step of that getting focused phase is to start building out strategies for each of those 6 strategic priorities. And so that's the work that we're focusing on now, in between now and the January board meeting, so that we can come to you in January with a set of maybe 3 to 5 strategies for each of those 6 priorities that start identifying kind of the pathway towards how we would implement the priority. And, you know, so it's still at kind of a high level, and isn't getting into the weeds yet in terms of the details of the specific actions. But between the January board meeting and April, that's when we would take the strategies that you approve and then build out specific tactics and actions with timelines, and the ability to measure progress, and present that back to the board in April. And that timeline, as we talked about before, is partially driven by one of the governor's initiatives, which is to make sure that all state agencies have updated strategic plans. And there's also some guidance on content there from the governor's office, in particular regarding action plans and how we might measure them. And so coming to the board in January and April should put us on a path to comply with the governor's directive to complete this work by June 30th. And obviously we're doing this in a short timeline, but I think we can have a really robust plan that has specific detail in it by April. It's not to say that it can't be tweaked after April, you know, as we're working through, you know, the implementation of the actions in the plan. So that's our path to the next couple of board meetings, and not really looking for any specific actions from the committee today, other than to see if you have any questions or comments about that, and what to expect in the months ahead.
Lindsay?
Thank you. Thanks for that great update. Just wanted to reflect back at the October board meeting, how impactful that presentation was. It was a lot of information, but really great content for all of the board to hear. I like that you're going to each committee, and kind of giving this update. Is there a plan from OWEB staff, to communicate this if a particular board member doesn't serve on a committee? So, you're going to all the committees and then you'll come back to the board. Is there a plan to maybe fill in any gaps that may exist there?
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. And I think every member is on a committee, but there are members that are unable to attend today, Mark and Barbara, for example. And so what we're going to try to do is get this draft of the next set of strategies as soon as we can, to get that in the hands of board members in advance of January. If they, via email communication, if they have some specific questions, we can work with them one-on-one individually to answer their questions, hopefully, and bring them up to speed on where we are in the timeline of the process. So I think you're right. There's going to be a couple of board members that won't have had the benefit of participation in these committee meetings.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? I say hats off. I mean, it looks like, what I remember from the discussions at the board, the revisions to these priorities on this one pager, looks like you guys were definitely, taking the discussion items and putting them into this. So thanks for that, and look forward to the discussion at the board meeting in January.
As are we. Thanks, Dan.
Andrew, you gotta take yourself off mute.
There we are. Thank you.
There you go. Yeah.
So this is a real broad question, and I'm just trying to get ahead of some of the opportunities for applications, and rather than see them float on past when there might be a lot of interest. So I was just curious, and maybe Liza Jane has some comments from the Eastern perspective. What kind of appetite is there, especially here in the East, for doing the kind of work that we see in the 6 priorities shared for today's meeting? So what kind of appetite is out there to make use of these kinds of interventions? And then secondly, how, kind of from a marketing standpoint, like how does the word get out to those who might be interested in supporting this kind of work? So perhaps that's too broad for our meeting agenda today, but any comments, I'd appreciate it.
Dan Brown, I don't know if you can see, but Stephanie has her hand up.
I can. I was just pausing to see if anybody had anything for Andrew. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Yep, I did want to give committee members the first opportunity before I responded, but yep, I'm not seeing any hands. So I would say, I think it would be good for us to take the conversation offline, Andrew, and note that we do try to reach out to at least 3 non-traditional partners per quarter and have exactly the kinds of conversations that you're asking about. How can we work together? What is your mission? What is our mission? OWEB 101. Are there ways that we can work together? And we do have some new programs that we are in the process of standing up that I think would be interesting for us to talk about. So my suggestion is that I reach out to you offline and we have that conversation. One thing that we've done in some of these meetings is include board members that are interested in participating. And so I want to make sure and put that out there to the committee members, the board members on today, that you are welcome to join that conversation if you're interested, and we can definitely set something up for the upcoming quarter.
Thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, and I was thinking, it was a very good broad question, and I think that's kind of what the strategy piece of this is to sort of delve into kind of those action items, and then it's just all the work and all the different grant opportunities that are available to folks is how I think a lot of this stuff gets implemented. Liza Jane.
Yeah, thank you, neighbor. I think, our watershed councils are the avenue in the east for learning what's possible for on the land for a private landowner that wants to do some work, or whoever. And they get capacity grants and engagement grants to reach out in the community and find people that want to do work on the land and projects. And so I would say that's my understanding of the process of getting the word out. And then there's lots of others, but to answer your question about appetite, it is enormous. I would say it's enormous, and getting bigger all the time. So yeah, it's good. Thanks for the question.
Yeah. Eric?
Thanks, Dan. Just in response to the opportunity for public participation, since the strategic plan will be an agenda item on each of the next two board meetings in January and April, we have public comment periods at every board meeting, and certainly on the material that's presented, and the materials that the board will act on will be posted on our website 2 weeks in advance of each of those board meetings. So that gives people an opportunity to hopefully look at and digest the material. And then if you have comments to make, certainly welcome to come and do that at the board meetings.
And the April board meeting is in Baker City, right?
That's correct. January is virtual and April is in Baker City.
Yeah. Little hop, skip over the mountains. Come join us.
Great. Well, thanks, Andrew, for that question and the conversation from folks. And if we're done with that item, we are going to wrap up early today. We have just an open other business agenda item for folks to bring up anything that they're interested and curious about. Does anybody have anything? I had one just curiosity. There was one of, I think OWEB staff had a meeting with grantees about the new cultural resource requirements associated with the Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery Funds. In the lottery funds, and I was just sort of curious about how that landed, whether there's any sort of, whether people were concerned or if things, just curious about what the outcome of that was. I didn't join the meeting, and it seems pretty relevant to this committee, so I just thought I'd see if anybody had anything around that.
Sure, thanks, Dan. Dan's referring to the programmatic agreement that OWEB is currently working with our Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery Federal Funding Agency, NOAA, on to address compliance requirements for Section 106 of the Historic Preservation Act. And what we heard, Dan, at that webinar is there are quite a few of our grantees who are very familiar with the requirements and have been implementing them, because every federal agency has to comply with Section 106. And so many of our grantees, if they have done work on federal land, or if they have done work that requires a federal Army Corps permit, they have gone through the process. So they understand it. There probably are going to be some projects with grantees down the road who maybe haven't been familiar with the process And so we'll be working more with our grantees to help understand what timelines look like, what costs might be entailed in putting together their compliance with the Act on cultural resources. And the other thing that we're encouraging people to do is make sure that as you're planning out restoration projects, it might be more beneficial to our grantees to use a phased approach where they come in for a technical assistance grant, which can cover the costs for obtaining those permits and the compliance that they need to, which sometimes can involve hiring archaeologists as consultants and can take some time to go through the process. And so by having a robust budget in a technical assistance application, hopefully it'll better set them up to be shovel ready for when they come in with the restoration applications. And so that's something we're going to continue to message out there. And right now we're still working with NOAA to finalize the programmatic agreement. So we're not there yet. And so we don't have a date specific when those new requirements are going to actually hit, but we'll keep in communication with our grantees to give them as much advance notice as we can.
Cool. Thanks. Anybody have anything else? I have a reminder for, oh, Liza Jane, I'm sorry. I
Don't
could
be
barely
sorry.
see that hand. That your hand blends in with your background.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. If I knew how to do anything with background, I would, but I don't. I wanted to just share something, kind of out of the box, but it's to warm your heart today. I learned yesterday that Mexico, the country of, has passed a new law that all their infrastructure, all their roads, new roads built, roads being repaired, have to incorporate wildlife crossing.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So that makes me happy, and I'm sure we'll be soon to follow something like that. That's all.
Thank you. Any other fun news? So the reminder, I was just going to remind everybody, I know you don't need a reminder, but we have regarding the FIP, we have a couple meetings on the calendar coming up February 7th and I believe March 12th, which are pretty important meetings for this committee in engaging on the next cohort of FIPs. That's it. I think we are wrapping up early today. Hope everybody has a great holiday season. Solstice is just around the corner, so we're almost through the darkest days, which will be nice. All right. See y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
Happy holidays.